Okay guys, Timmy coming at you again, and today I'm going to give you a quick little tutorial on diuretics and how they lower blood pressure. So let's look at this. And again, the devil is in the details. I know it's tough, but this is it. Here we go. This is where the rubber meets the road, ladies and gentlemen. This is where the blood, the plasma, is filtered, the nephron, the functional unit of the kidney. And you already had this in AMP, so I'm going to make it real quick. When the blood comes into the renal artery, it's going to get smaller and smaller, and then it's going to split into the afferent artery. And the afferent arteriole, I take that back, is going to go into this ball of capillaries called the glomerulus. Now, one of the things that can cause an increase in urine production is an increase in systolic blood pressure, or an increase in pressure through that afferent arteriole. When that happens, you're simply going to filter more plasma. That's purely mechanical. It's called pressure diuresis, right? So in a normal human being at rest, if your blood pressure goes up, urine production goes up. So in a person who has high blood pressure, one of the ways that you can lower the blood pressure, and we talked about this, is by lowering blood volume. And since 60% of your blood is made of water, and the kidneys handle water, if you can reduce your blood volume, reduce the water in your blood, you will reduce venous return of blood to the heart. Right? There's less blood going back to the right side of the heart. And if you decrease venous return to the right side of the heart, you're going to decrease the stretch of the right heart. And as we learned, if you decrease the stretch, then that will lead to a decrease in the force of contraction of the right side of the heart, and then ultimately a decrease in the systolic blood pressure generated by the right side of the heart, the right ventricle in particular. The other thing you need to remember is that the amount of blood pumped by the right heart is equal to the amount of blood pumped by the left heart. So when that deoxygenated blood is now being sent to the lungs to get oxygenated, it's going to come back to the left side of the heart. And the same thing is going to happen. There's going to be decreased stretch in the left side of the heart, which means there's a decrease in the force of contraction, which leads to a decrease in systolic blood pressure. So this is how diuretics work. They take advantage of Starling's law. So let's look at this real quick and just go through a few things. Now look, watch. If you're going to clean a closet, what do? You take everything out of the closet, and then you decide what you're going to put back. So the nephron kind of does the same thing. It filters all of the plasma into the collecting tubules, and then as it travels through the yellow brick road, it decides what it's going to bring back, right? So once you filter the plasma, about 70% of the stuff that got filtered by the glomerulus and ends up in the proximal convoluted tubules gets reabsorbed back into the blood. That makes sense, right? You filtered it, right? You're going to clean your closet, and you know you want to put your skis back into your closet. You're not going to put your skis in your garage. You're going to leave them right by the closet. So again, the body doing stuff that makes sense. The stuff that got filtered, 70% of it is going to get reabsorbed back into the blood. And that's in the proximal convoluted tubules. Now, as you can see, the tubules kind of thin out and they make a little loop. I like to call it the loop of Don Henley. He was discovering it while I was singing a song on stage. Never forget it. I think it was a Thursday. Anyways, I digress. There are two portions to the loop of Don Henley. You got the descending limb, and then you have the ascending limb. All I want you to know about this is in the descending limb, the only thing that can get reabsorbed back into the blood, is water. So water gets reabsorbed in the descending limb. Then you move up ascending limb. The only thing that can get reabsorbed is stuff, solute. And then you have the thickened portion of the ascending limb. This is important. Now, in the thickened portion of the ascending limb, there are these co-transporters. It's called the sodium, potassium, chloride co-transporter, or symporter. And this is ATP dependent. It requires ATP. So in this thickened portion of the ascending limb, in order to reabsorb sodium, you have to reabsorb potassium and chloride. If either one of those is not reabsorbed, if any one of those are not reabsorbed, you'll reabsorb none of them. So there's a drug out there called Lasix, furosemide. And what it does in the thickened portion of the ascending limb, it prevents chloride from being reabsorbed back into the blood. So watch. If you don't reabsorb chloride because you're taking Lasix, that means you're not going to reabsorb sodium or potassium. So sodium and potassium are going to remain in the collecting tubules. And if there is more stuff in the collecting tubules, you make more urine. More stuff in the collecting tubules, more urine. So how Lasix works is by inhibiting that chloride seat on that co-transporter that transports sodium and potassium. And as a result of more stuff in the collecting tubules, you make more urine. Also, the osmotic effect of sodium. If sodium remains in the collecting tubules, water will remain there also. So that's how Lasix works as a diuretic. And because it affects the loop of Don-Henle, that's why it's called a loop diuretic. And it's very powerful because this chloride, potassium, sodium co-transporter, symporter, is responsible for reabsorbing a lot of that sodium. So again, if you don't reabsorb chloride, you don't reabsorb sodium, potassium. That's why Lasix is referred to as a non-potassium sparing diuretic. You lose potassium. That's why when people are on Lasix, they got to take a potassium supplement. Boom. That's a loop diuretic. Now, you have your thiazide diuretics. Now, one of the things that like hydrochlorothiazide, they affect the distal convoluted tubules. Basically what they do is they prevent the reabsorption of sodium through these thiazide-like channels. But here's the thing. One of the things that happens is in order to get rid of that drug in the blood, hydrochlorothiazide, chlorothiazide, that's terrible, Tim. Let me do better. Hydrochlorothiazide and uric acid compete for elimination with the same protein channel, right? Urate, uric acid. If you got hydrochlorothiazide in your system, then you're going to get rid of the hydrochlorothiazide and you're not going to get rid of the uric acid. That's why hydrochlorothiazide increases the risk of gout. Uric acid is insoluble in the blood and it will form a precipitate. It will form a crystal. And that goes to the most dependent part of your body, which in most people, unless you have Flintstone feet, where all your toes are the same, the most dependent part is your big toe, so it will lodge in the tissue around your big toe. You get gouty arthritis. So one of the risks associated with taking hydrochlorothiazide is gout. So if you start developing symptoms of gout, they should reduce your risk or reduce your dose or take you off of it, find another medicine. Now, because the amount of sodium and therefore water in the distal convoluted tubules is relatively low. Hydrochlorothiazide is not as potent as a loop diuretic. Hydrochlorothiazide is usually given in conjunction with another type of antihypertensive medicine, and it's usually for people who just got high blood pressure and they're relatively young because the side effects are relatively low. So those are the hydrochlorothiazides. The other ones are the spironolactone. Now, if you remember the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, you will remember the fact that aldosterone is released from the adrenal cortex, and its effect is primarily on the distal convoluted tubules. And you're not going to believe this, but embedded in the cells that make up the distal convoluted tubules, there's a pump called the sodium-potassium pump. And the sodium-potassium pump, believe it or not, pumps sodium and potassium. So it will pump the sodium that was going to get peed into the toilet. It will pump 3 sodiums back into the blood, and 2 potassiums that were in the blood, it will pump into the urine. So you will be getting rid of potassium, and you will be pumping in sodium. And the osmotic effect of sodium will allow the water from the distal tubules to be reabsorbed back into the blood. So aldosterone increases your blood volume by increasing sodium reabsorption. So there's a medication out there called spironolactone that inhibits aldosterone, blocks these little receptors on the distal convoluted tubules, so aldosterone can't exert its effect. If you don't pump sodium back into the blood, it remains along with the water in the collecting tubules, and you will pee more. And because the only way to get potassium out of your blood is to pump it out, if you inhibit aldosterone, you can cause your potassium in your blood to elevate. So spironolactone, aldactone, is a potassium-sparing diuretic, and it takes advantage of the fact that aldosterone stimulates that sodium-potassium pump. And again, it's not as powerful as the loop diuretic, but it still has the effect, the diuretic effect. And that's why in people who are taking spironolactone, aldactone, you have to worry about elevated potassium levels. The other thing that spironolactone does, aldactone, is it blocks the androgen. That's terrible. Spironolactone, aldactone blocks androgen receptors. So androgen, testosterone. So it decreases testosterone levels in men. So spironolactone is also used for gender reassignment by decreasing the amount of testosterone in men. So men who've been on this for a while, they can start developing man boobs, right? They will lose body hair. They'll gain hair on their head, which, you know, look, I'd rather be bald than have no testosterone. I'm just saying. So one of the things that you will see is people who are undergoing gender reassignment, and people with high blood pressure can be taking this because it affects testosterone levels. Also in women, they believe that female acne is made worse by an imbalance between testosterone and estrogen. So by blocking the testosterone that some women make, and we all make a little bit of each, that will decrease the stimulation of sebaceous glands and reduce acne in women. That's why it's prescribed for women in the treatment of acne. So those are real simple explanations of the different types of diuretics used and how they work. I hope that helped.